Hobart School of Welding Technology presents Training in Gas Tungsten Arc Welding. Topic number 7, Job Practice. Fillet weld, outside corner joint, flat position, without and with filler metal. The objective of this job practice is to acquire skill to produce quality outside corner joint fillet welds on 16 and 11 gauge mild steel in the flat position. The finished welds should be reasonably smooth and evenly fill the joint. The size of the welds will vary slightly based on the thickness of the material. The weld symbol could look like this. A fillet weld is deposited on the outside corner of the joint using E70S3 filler metal. The leg length for the 16 gauge is 1/16 inch, while for the 11 gauge, the leg length is 1/8 inch. Material: 16 and 11 gauge mild steel. Electrode: 1% thoriated tungsten, 1/8 inch diameter. Shielding gas: argon, welding grade. Filler metal: E70S3, 1/16 inch diameter for the 16 gauge and 3/32 inch diameter for the 11 gauge. Equipment: power source, AC-DC combination. Collet and collet body, 1/8 inch. Nozzle, 3/8 inch inside diameter. Protective clothing, gloves, and helmet. Wire brush, wire cutters, and pliers. Machine settings. Polarity: direct current electrode negative, straight polarity. Amperage setting: 45 to 55 for the 16 gauge, 75 to 85 for 11 gauge. Hot start: 4. Post purge: 10 to 15 seconds. High frequency: automatic. High frequency control setting: 50. Gas flow rate: 20 cubic feet per hour. Tungsten electrode stick out: 1 electrode diameter. To form the workpiece for this exercise, place one piece of 16 gauge steel flat on the table. At the edge, place a second plate perpendicular to the first plate. The edges should be placed together to form an equal joint. Place a small tack weld at the right-hand corner without filler metal. The joint should fit together tightly along its length to reduce the possibility of melt-through. If the edges do not line up accurately, then place a second tack weld at the opposite end of the joint. Place the workpiece in the flat position with the tack weld on the left for a right-handed welder. The work angle is 90 degrees from the plane of the table with the tip of the electrode directed along the groove formed by the edges of the plate. The travel angle is 20 degrees push. Start the arc by pressing the foot pedal and move the torch evenly along the joint as the edges melt to form the bead. Be sure to keep the electrode tip centered in the joint. At the end of the joint, release the foot pedal and continue holding the torch over the solidifying puddle to prevent oxidation. The finished weld should be flat and 1 electrode diameter wide. It should also be free of any edge weld undercut. A small bead should be formed on the root side. The next exercise covers the same type of weld, but this time with the addition of 1/16 inch diameter filler metal. The filler rod should be pointed at the leading edge of the puddle, directly over the weld axis, and then angled up about 20 degrees. As the torch moves evenly along the joint, the filler metal is added by moving the rod in and out of the leading edge of the puddle. Do not move the rod up and down. This can cause tungsten contamination and too much preheating of the filler metal. The finished weld will be even, slightly convex, and 1 electrode diameter wide. A small bead will have formed on the back side for full penetration. For the next 2 exercises, prepare a workpiece with 2 11-gauge pieces tack welded at each end. Increase the amperage to 75 to 85 amps and weld the joint with filler metal using the same technique as for the 16-gauge material. The filler rod should be 3/32 inch in diameter. Use the same dipping technique as for the 16-gauge. You will probably find that the 11-gauge material is easier to weld due to the larger puddle and slightly slower travel speed. The finished weld will have a bead face width of 1½ electrode diameters. Inspect the weld and then continue practice.